This is Whimsy's K9 Moto harness. It is basically a standard harness in the front that goes over their head. There's the chest piece. This goes under their chest, under their front legs, and then up through the top. So that's the basic part of this harness. But there is the addition of this strap that goes along their back, and then there's the waist belt. So the reason why we have this is so that you can strap your dog into the back of the cockpit using this security loop. So that keeps their butt down instead of potentially coming up, or for them trying to slide the harness over their head and try and get out. So it has the safety loop in the back where you can put your tethers. It also has this easy to hold harness handle here, so you can lift her in and out and provide support. And then it's also got a security loop in the front where you can run tethers through. This harness, it's custom. There are 4 measurements that you provide in order to get your harness. What I did for Whimsy, because she's still a pup, she's only 14 weeks old, is I provided measurements for the dog to be between 30 and 50 pounds. And so that allows me to have this on the smallest setting for her 30 pounds now, but I can adjust it so that by the time she's 50 pounds, she'll be at the full extension of this harness. So I'm going to put this harness on Whimsy. This is the first time that she's wearing it, and she's still a pup, so she's not really used to it, but let's use some treats and get her excited about it. Good girl. Okay, so the first thing is you want to slide it over their head. Good girl. Good girl, Whimsy. Good girl. So now that piece is there, and then you attach it like a regular harness under the leg. Good girl. Yes, good girl. And so that is around the front part. And then she's got the waist belt. Good girl. Stand. Stand. Yes, good girl. And then the waist belt. Let's see if I tightened it enough. No, it could be a little bit tighter. So you can see that there is some give here. I can tighten this a little bit so that it's tighter around her waist. But yeah, it's a pretty good fit. I can probably tighten these just a little bit more. The neck looks really good. Stand. And you can see that the strap that goes down her back, I do have it almost as small as possible, but you can move it as she gets a bit bigger. And she's growing like a weed, so that's going to happen fast. Good girl. So yeah, so it looks like she's doing okay with it. Can you turn? Sit. Good girl. High five. Yes, good girl. When we got Whimsy's Cockpit yesterday, what we did is we laid it down in the middle of the living room and we treated her for being inside the cockpit. So first it started with her sitting in there, then I got her to lay down, we had her stay, she got used to being there, and then throughout the afternoon she would voluntarily go into her cockpit and I would treat her every time. Eventually she got to the point where she enjoyed her cockpit so much she fell asleep in it. So now the next step is to take the cockpit and mount it on the bike and then have her do those same activities, the sitting, the laying down, the staying, up top here on the bike with the engine off, just to get her used to being at this higher level. I'm going to lift Whimsy up into her cockpit. With Moxie at 75 pounds, she was able to leap right up. I would guide her using the handle on the back of the harness for some additional support. But Whimsy's 30 pounds, and to keep the weight off of her joints, all the jumping, the leaping, I'm going to lift her in and out. So that's what we're going to do next, and have her getting used to being in the cockpit. Okay? Come on. Good girl. Yes. Okay, so. Good girl. So I'm putting her in front ways, and we've practiced this down when we were off of in the cockpit in the living room to turn. Turn. Whimsy, sit. 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 Good girl. Lay down. Lay down. Good girl. So now she's starting to get into the position. I want her to just scoot back a little bit. So now she's up here, she's in a good position, and we're just going to keep treating her for being up here. Good girl. Good girl. She might want to readjust herself a little bit. She's maybe a little bit on her tail back there, but this is all looking really good. She's happy up here. She's paying attention to me, which is what I want. And then we're just going to see if she volunteers the behavior of like looking up at me. When she does, then I'll treat her for it. Just because I know that that means that she's calm enough to like look at me and isn't so focused on everything else except me. I know there are bees as well. Whimsy. Good girl. Good girl. In terms of the treats, when we're doing this type of activity that's very new and different for her, I'm using really high value treats. And for her, lay down. These are just really small pieces of like dried chorizo. And for her, she loves it. She loves everything, but this, you know, is high value because she really performs. So maybe now is not the time to be using those all natural, like sweet potato, like those types of treats that are not as tasty as something like this. It's because you really want her to have a positive association with the cockpit, knowing that she's going to get treated for being up here and it's a positive experience. In terms of harnessing Whimsy into the cockpit, I have a few different ways to do it here for this dog, which is 30 pounds, but in a standard size cockpit. So for harnessing, I am using rock straps. I love the rock straps because one side of it is bungee and the other side is a solid polypropylene. So they're really heavy duty, they're very sturdy, but they also allow a little bit of give so that she can adjust herself, so she's not fully like restrained. So what I do is I use the first straps. The first straps will go through the security loop in the front of her harness, right where her chest is. Lay down. And that will attach to this front anchor here. So I already have that set up. So these two go through her first security loop. I also have another set here, which will go over her and into the handle of the harness. That keeps her down, especially now as she's really fidgety and like all over the place. This will help keep her down and realize that she needs to be in the laying down position. In the back, we have rock straps that go through the security loop on top of the waist belt. What that does is it prevents her butt from coming up in the case of an emergency stop or if there was a crash situation. That keeps her firmly placed within the padded walls of the cockpit and stops any additional movement from the backside. So the restraints is normally the hardest part for the dog to get used to because the dogs don't want to be cushioned in here. They want to be free and jump and do the things that dogs like to do. But it's just a matter of just continuing to keep the straps tight so that they can't move around too much, and just be here with them and just be calm, keep giving them treats. And then eventually you're going to start moving and they're going to be so busy and focused on all the other things that are going on that the restraints are going to sort of be the last thing on their minds. What we see with like new cockpit riders is when they send us photos and videos and they're so excited about riding together and that they had such a great ride, the one thing that we do notice and that we always try and remind cockpit riders is that the tethers need to be tight. I know that like she's gonna fuss in a little bit if I stop giving her treats. She's gonna want to get out of her restraints, and that's probably what new cockpit riders are also experiencing. But you need to have the tethers tight enough so that in a crash situation or if there was an emergency stop, she doesn't slide forward or to come out of the cockpit. So that's one thing that we always focus on, especially with new riders. It's especially important when the dog is in a cockpit that's a little bit too big for them. Obviously, she's 30 pounds in a standard cockpit. So you want to make sure that they are tight in their cockpit because there is already a lot of space around them. By leaving the tethers loose, there's a lot of movement here. So you don't want them swinging from side to side. You want them to stay firmly planted in their cockpit. The next step is the eye protection. So for Whimsy, we've got these rec specs. We've tried them on a couple of times, done some sensitization. She does pretty good with them when I'm treating her. When I stop treating her, she tries to rub them off. So I'm just practicing that same thing that we were doing when we were down on the ground so that she has a positive association with it. So I'm just going to slide them on her. I'm going to put them on. And then I'm going to give her some treats and tell her what a good girl she is. What a good girl. What a good girl. Look at all that fluff. Good girl. Good girl. There we go. One thing that I'm going to do with these rec specs, because she is new to using them, so that I'm not so concerned about it when we're riding, I'm going to attach the rec specs to her collar. Just going to put a little tether around it. That way, if she does manage to slide them off by using her front paws, they won't go anywhere. I won't ride over them, and they'll be there waiting for me when I stop and I can take them off. One thing that we tell new cockpit riders is if your dog is fussing, either because of the restraints or the eye protection, the key thing is to get going. The moment that you start moving, they're going to forget that they've got all of this going on. They're going to be focused on what's going on outside of their cockpit area and seeing and smelling all of the new things. So she's doing pretty good. I think if I stop training her, she might end up being a little bit more fussy. A good thing, she's a puppy. Just like any puppy training, you do things in spurts. So we have everything on her. She looks ready to go. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to let her down. I'm going to treat her. I'm going to play with her. I'm going to show her like it's a party time. She did great. And then we're going to do this all over again. But next time we're going to do it quicker, and then we're going to actually go for a ride. We've gone through each of the steps once, and now I think she's ready to go for her first ride. So I'm going to put on her harness, put her in the cockpit, harness her in, put in her rec specs, and then we're going to go. So let's do this. Good girl. Yeah, good girl. Okay, let's lift you up into the cockpit. Saddle up. Good girl. Let's get some harnessing done. So I'm going to put them on, and then I'm going to tether them to her collar. Good girl. So what I'll do is I will just do this. I'll actually put it through to, let's turn on the engine. Here you go. Good girl.
Back just right. Turn on it. It's okay, Whimsy. Good girl. Yeah, good girl.
Good girl.
It's all new. It's all new. And you're doing it just right. Good girl.
She didn't seem to fuss too much. I think there's new things to see and smell, so she's calming down a little bit, so I think we can go a little further. Whimsy's first ride in her K9 Moto cockpit was a complete success. We did off-road together, we went on the twisties, not a problem at all. She didn't fuss, she was looking up, she was sniffing things, and yeah, I think she had a fantastic time. I can't wait to do it again with her.
Now that Whimsy has had her first official K9 Moto cockpit ride, that means one very important thing. She has earned her name. Rides with the Wind.